Coming up, did Alabama coach Nick Saban accidentally reveal his true feelings about Jalen Hurts? I'm not so sure, but this should be one juicy conversation. We'll talk about it next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and what a Monday it is to have you with us here on SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. I got my rain gear on today. This is Mike Johnson, former Alabama All-American. Big spring games in Athens and Tuscaloosa, Baton Rouge, Starkville, kind of closing out the spring season here for the SEC, looking ahead to 2018, and huge announcement today. For the very first time, we are also broadcasting simulcast here on Twitter as well, and I have to admit, this may be a bridge too far for me. You know, it's like it's sort of like the pizza. Like once you put that like third or fourth topping, eventually everything just sort of falls in your lap.
Yep.
I can handle the YouTube comment section. I can handle the Facebook comment section. But if you give me a third comment section and another collection of Yahoos to sort of corral together every single day, this may be what finally sort of the whole house of cards may come crumbling down now.
I feel like we're heading into like tribes. Like we're gonna have our YouTube tribe, our Twitter tribe, our Facebook tribe. But you're right, there's a lot to cover today. So I guess more audience is better.
So it's at SEC Country on Twitter, and sure enough, if you're normally a Facebook viewer or normally a YouTube viewer, maybe go over there and just pop a few comments in the comment section of the Twitter feed, and we'll see if we can make sure that's up and running and interacting the way that it's supposed to be. We'll look forward to doing that. Without further ado, let me dive into the big news around the SEC here. A lot of spring game talk, a lot of quarterback talk, some kind of interesting coaching comments coming up here today as well. Let's begin it all right now, though, with item number 1 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And the comedian Funny Mane, who I believe is an Alabama fan, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is Mane an Alabama fan? Well, he was watching the Alabama spring game apparently on television, at least at a television recording of it, and he captured some audio, which appears to be sort of one of those live mic, Saban not really realizing he's getting picked up moments where you can tell me how you judge this, but part of this is inaudible, but it certainly sounds like from the TV broadcast that there was maybe a little bit of a slippage here in terms of Saban showing some frustration with Hurts, Jalen Hurts, his quarterback, that he would not have wanted to be a part of his official comments on the Alabama A-Day game. Here is what Funny Mane, the comedian, captured on TV. Take a look at this.
He takes off. 26 yards there. His life was rented for 2 years. Yeah. I mean, the third-team quarterback can move the team right down the field from the ball. Yeah.
Oh. So what Saban seems to be saying there is, I mean, the third-team quarterback is moving the ball right down the field by passing the ball. I think making reference to, and you would know this better than me, Jalen Hurts tucking it and running it when there was maybe an opportunity to throw the football, maybe not giving his offense a chance, as Saban's described earlier during the offseason. Is it fair to say that we're capturing Saban here, giving some criticism of Jalen Hurts?
I think it's 100%. Listen, I'd love nothing more as a Bama guy to brush this under the rug and say, I don't know what Nick meant. He might have been talking about the secondary and how they lack depth. But this, to me, when you hear him say 2 years right at the beginning of that clip, he's talking about Jalen Hurts, and he's talking about Mac Jones, and he's talking about that Jalen Hurts had an opportunity to step up in the pocket. And for anybody that wasn't watching the game, this game was a little bit different than most other spring games. I don't know how much of it you watched. Joey Galloway and Kirk Herbstreit were on the field holding microphone. There was no other analyst up in the booth. There was just the commentator up in the booth and Joey Galloway and Kirk Herbstreit down with hot mics on the field. So Herbstreit puts the mic down by his side. Nick Saban comes up to kind of tell him something. Listen, the third-string quarterback's going right down the field passing the ball, and this is what we get from I'm not going to say our backup guy, but this is what we get from Jalen Hurts right now.
Now, it is worth pointing out that when Nick Saban gave his official post-game comments, they were a lot more cleaned up, a lot more polished than this. Here is the official evaluation that Nick Saban gave for, you mentioned Mac Jones and Jalen Hurts. Remember, no Tua Tagovailoa playing because of his injury. This was Jalen Hurts' day to shine. Did he do that? Well, here was part of the evaluation that Nick Saban offered.
I was not disappointed in the way Jalen played. I think we've got some guys that can rush a little bit, and I think that even though we're rushing 4 guys most of the time, there was way too much pressure in the pocket for the quarterback to be able to operate like we'd like. I think Jalen made some good plays in the game and made some good throws. Obviously, I'm sure if you talk to him, he'd say there's things that I wish I could have done better and would improve on, and that's what we'll go to work on. So we've been very pleased with the progress that Mac has made. So that's good for us, too. That gives us more depth at that position.
So pleased with the progress of Mac Jones. This was a significant audition for him. Not disappointed in Jalen Hurts. But why did Mac Jones look better than Jalen Hurts? Here is some of the explanation that Nick Saban offered for why we saw maybe a superior performance from Jones.
We have the first offense playing against the first defense. All right, the first defense is probably a lot better than the second defense. And we probably have, if you're going to evaluate our team, we have a little less depth on defense based on all the players that we have that we lost. So I think that probably the second offense was a little bit better than the second defense. So when I say they were better, they were actually, better all the way around. They were better in pass protection. They were better in their production and performance, and that's why they won the game.
So what's more true here? The accidental audio from Nick Saban that Funny Man captured, or the official audio that Nick Saban provided when he'd had some time to think about it, and maybe an opportunity to kind of compare and contrast what Mac Jones did, what Jalen Hurts did, what both these guys maybe didn't do.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere in the middle, and that stinks to kind of say. I don't think that you saw the step forward that Jalen Hurts probably wanted to take. I don't think you saw the protection that the first-string offensive line should have given him. Listen, I'm very high on Alabama's first-string offensive line. They were not there on Saturday. They did not help Jalen Hurts' case at all. But I also think you saw a Mac Jones that was picking apart a depleted secondary, right? Yeah. I mean, we already know that Bama's secondary is depleted from last year. Everybody that was backups last year is now, with that first-string defense. So you saw a little bit of both. I thought that Mac Jones looked extremely good. He was the MVP of the spring game on Saturday. I think that kind of tells you, but I think you can also read in those words the fact that he says, I wasn't disappointed in Jalen.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I was really happy about Jalen.
Right.
It means I wasn't disappointed in what Jalen was doing because of the offensive line.
That's well said. On Facebook, Steven Sutton says Jalen needs to change positions to either running back, wide receiver, tight end, or something other than quarterback. If he transfers, he's still going to be the same passer. Saban has and is giving him every chance to prove he can pass the ball. Bama can run a two-quarterback system, which would be deadly to their opponents. So that's Steven Sutton's comment in the Facebook live comment section. I will tell you that while Mac Jones may have outplayed Jalen Hurts on Saturday, I don't think that Mac Jones is the best option as backup quarterback for Alabama. And the thought of Jalen Hurts changing positions, even if that's better for Jalen Hurts' NFL future, I think it makes Alabama worse. I think that Saban's job here, and it's a tough job, and you just may not be able to do it, but your job here is to convince Hurts to stay and then find a way to make him be happy being backup quarterback. That is a tough hoe to row here, or tough row to hoe, I guess is the right way to say that phrase. But that's what's best for Alabama. Hurts transferring, even with Mac Jones showing what he did on Saturday, that's not as good for Alabama. Hurts at another position becomes just another good athlete. It's that athleticism as a second quarterback that keeps Alabama at that national championship level. Harder to win a national championship if you don't have Jalen Hurts as your second quarterback.
Yeah, no, I think it's tough. I feel better about Mac Jones, 100% better than I did about him on Friday after seeing him in the game. I think that he can be a game manager. I don't know if he's as good as, say, Jacob Coker that came a couple of years ago and wins a national championship, but he can service. But I definitely think you're missing something by not having Jalen a part of this football team. And I think it's going to come down to Jalen having to make a decision. Do I believe in myself as a quarterback? Do I think I can get to the next level as a quarterback? Or do I want to stay at Alabama and try to help this team win in whatever capacity they want me to stay in? It's going to be tough. I think that Nick Saban, you're right. He's got a tough job ahead of him because, listen, he knows it's best if Jalen Hurts stays in Tuscaloosa, but at what point does the distraction of Jalen Hurts versus Tua Tagovailoa with Mac Jones looming in the background, at what point does that become too much for Nick Saban and this team?
Robbie Eversole on Facebook says, I don't care how good Hurts is. If Nick Saban wants a pass-first quarterback, then Hurts is going to be out of here, which kind of goes back to the point you were making a moment ago. As it stands right now, I think the situation in Alabama is actually getting less controversial. Because, I didn't see Tua play on Saturday. Based on the last time I saw Tua, the most recent performance from Jalen Hurts, it's getting harder and harder to make an argument for Jalen Hurts. So
it's almost like the kids that go to the draft and don't work out. Yeah. That's what Tua did Saturday. He was just like, you know what? Obviously he's not going to play and he's injured, but it's almost like his stock rose by not being on the field.
At a certain point in time, the only argument you have for Jalen Hurts is what his record is as a starter, and the question becomes, as a quarterback playing for Alabama, who wouldn't have an elite record as a starter? But literally, that's getting to be about the only thing that you can point to as an argument for Hurts. He was not dazzling on Saturday. Tua Tagovailoa in the second half of the SEC championship game, as Barrett Jones said over the weekend, clearly gave Alabama a spark there. The argument for Hurts right now is just not a strong one.
Yeah, I think the argument you would make going into the fall is that if you look at the offensive line's performance on Saturday, you're going to need somebody who can run the ball at the quarterback position. That's the only angle of argument I'm taking in the form of anybody who wants to talk about Jalen being the starting quarterback, because I've talked so good about this offensive line. I was so disappointed in their performance Saturday. So if they're going to play like that in the fall, then you look at it and say, boy, you need somebody back there that can be that kind of extra running back and a quarterback that can run around. Other than that, though, there was no steps forward Saturday for Jalen Hurts from what we've seen the previous 2 years.
Let me pop over to YouTube here because Esteban Estevez has already criticized me on there for saying I don't take enough care of this comment section as it is. 98 Sports Talk says Bama has been so good the team has covered up his deficiencies at quarterback. I think for the most part that's true when you reference Jalen Hurts. I think that Jalen Hurts was due to get exposed. We were talking about that a season ago during the offseason against most of the teams Alabama plays. It's just not going to happen. Even in Mississippi State, where on the road he threw the game-winning touchdown. I mean, those are receivers like was it Devontae Smith who catches it that day?
Yeah, I think so.
Those are receivers that should have been exploited all season long, but Hurts is just not accomplished enough as a passer to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the question comes down to this. If Mac Jones is your starting quarterback, can you cover up his deficiencies and actually win some of those games that you have to win? The question's not about can Jalen Hurts go out and win most of the football games. He's already answered that question. The question is, can he win the big games? Now, he failed to do that against Auburn this year, and he could have been the first quarterback to ever lose back-to-back national title games for Alabama. Had Tua not come in and saved that one. So I'm with you. I think the only argument you're making for Jalen Hurts at this point might be that, you know what, he has a good record and he's put his team in a position to win most of the time.
On YouTube, Morgan Recton says, okay, Mike, BA, let's say Hurts is definitely transferring. Is it better for him to get outside when he loses the job or stay this year and graduate and then transfer, be able to play right away? If he's on track to be able to graduate in 3 years, that's probably the best route, the best route for him to take. Don't you think so? I don't know.
It would be 3.5 years as an early enrollee. I think that's very doable for him. I don't know the answer to that because I don't know where he's thinking about going. If he's trying to go to another Division I school, let's say he's trying to go to FAU, I think you get out now, right? I think you go down and spend the summer with Lane Kiffin, you get back on track with whatever you think you're able to do under him, and you go ahead and head out. Now, if he's trying to go down a division and maybe the opponents aren't as tough to pass against, maybe he can kind of bring himself along, then maybe you think about sitting one more season at Bama and just playing immediately.
We'll have a lot more on this subject. Of course, Alabama fans and SEC fans who are interested will be weighing in all day long on both Facebook, YouTube, and now Twitter here on SEC Country Live each and every day. Let me do item number 2 for now, though, on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And another school that put 2 quarterbacks on display on Saturday with somewhat intriguing results here was Georgia, where the incumbent starter Jake Fromm probably did not impress people as much as maybe the expectations would have been. And in comparison to Justin Fields, the incoming freshman who Robert Rivera in the comment section said a moment ago, as a Florida fan, you see this guy oozing with talent, maybe jealous of what he sort of brings to the table as the number 2 quarterback. Maybe overall it was a better day for Fields than it was for Jake Fromm. When the game was over, Kirby Smart did give his evaluation first on Jake Fromm, and he uses a very similar excuse to what Nick Saban said a moment ago. Here is Kirby Smart on Jake Fromm.
I thought one of them, the one with to Bake, we had a coverage on 2 trap. He threw the ball, he had 2 rushers in his face. He threw it a little high, and Bake was there. The other one, he and the receiver not on the same page. The dog route didn't make a great decision, but one of them was a really good play by Bake. I give him credit in the overthrow. The other one wasn't as much. But I do think that our one defense is obviously way ahead of the 2 defense, and we got better players out there. Today was the first time I thought we had a little bit of continuity on the one defense with some rhythm. Really hasn't been like that much all spring from a continuity standpoint.
So we'll talk more about Justin Fields in a moment, but first of all, with Kirby Smart saying, hey, number 1 defense that Jake Fromm has to face, Justin Fields going against number 2 defense, that is very similar to Saban explaining away Mac Jones outplaying Jalen Hurts by saying it's number 1s versus number 2s. You played the game. How true is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's true to an extent, but this is when you're playing against great defenses, that's when you really want your quarterback to come along, right? I mean, the national championship against Alabama, you want that quarterback to be able to step up in the face. You want your offensive line to perform well, and really, I think that's the issue. It's not just you're playing against the first-string defense. When you talk about some of these games, you're talking about the offensive line really kind of struggling at times for Georgia and Alabama and some of the other schools that had spring games on Saturday. So I think he's speaking the truth to an extent, but I also think you don't want the picks to kind of show their ugly head, and we've talked about that before about interceptions, because my question all along has been Jake Fromm going into this year, if the running game's not there for him at certain points, is he going to be the guy that can carry this? I don't think we really saw one way or another Saturday, but it's not a definite yes in those scenarios.
On Facebook, Greg Steele says Jake Fromm's going to transfer. And listen, I want to be very clear about this. I don't think that's true. I don't think the G-Day performance for Fromm is really indicative of his talent. It was a bad game, and I haven't gone back and rewatched the whole thing on television. I was in Athens on Saturday, as you can tell by my sunburned face. I've gotten sunburned like 10 G days in a row. You'd think at some point in time I'd put some sunscreen on. It's never going to happen, I don't guess. But nonetheless, I got home yesterday and did rewatch some of the G-Day, and Kirby Smart was referencing some of the picks that Fromm threw in the game. It was weird to see him misfiring, and the running game wasn't a big part of what's going on there. Obviously, that's part of Fromm's strength, his ability to sort of check in and out of running plays, even sometimes different running plays to left side to right side, things like that. Fromm's probably hurt on that. I'm not even going to try to explain away what it was. It's just not a good day for Fromm. He played poorly. But there's a big difference between Jake Fromm in Georgia and Jalen Hurts at Alabama, if you don't mind me saying so. Fromm at Georgia has never played so badly that Kirby Smart ever thought about putting him on the bench. It's never happened. Now, it's only 1 year for Fromm. It's 2 years for Jalen Hurts. But Jalen Hurts was benched during a game in Alabama. Take away for a moment, it was the national championship game. Just the cold, hard facts. Hurts got benched for Alabama. There was never a moment last year when Kirby Smart would have even considered putting Jake Fromm on the bench, and he had a healthy Jacob Eason for the second half of the season there. So I'm going to treat that as the body of evidence for Jake Fromm and say a blip of not playing well during the G-Day game for me doesn't mean all that much.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to be very clear with how I feel about it. There's no way that both these quarterbacks spend the next 3 years at Georgia. I don't see it happening because 90% of the time, Jake Fromm isn't going to face a defense as good as he did Saturday. 90% of the time, he's not. Jalen Hurts, 90% of the time, did not either. But when you do face that kind of defense, I think you want to look better than Fromm looked Saturday. And when that starts happening, and all of a sudden the whispers from the stands are that why isn't Justin Fields on the field? Why isn't this number one quarterback playing? Bama went through a lot of the same things last year. Then all of a sudden that starts picking up momentum. Then all of a sudden you struggle against an Auburn. Then all of a sudden you struggle down the stretch. So I don't think, by no means do I take Saturday and say Jake Fromm's not the starting quarterback for Georgia. But I don't think that in the end, 3 years down the road, you can say this doesn't bring up any controversy at all.
Speaking of Justin Fields, Kirby Smart did talk about him after the game was over. The evolution that allowed Fields to play so well in what is sort of his unofficial college debut. Well, Kirby Smart said there really wasn't that much of a change for him over the course of the spring. He was kind of always ready to play. Here's Kirby on Justin Fields.
He's gotten better. He's more comfortable with the offense. But I'll be honest, I never felt like he was like behind with the offense from day one. He's done such a good job coming in and learning. It's not like it's been a growth process. He's gotten more confident. He's able to move around in the pocket and create some things when things break down.
So I think that's a pretty interesting level of praise there from Kirby Smart, but a specific thing, that he knew the offense. He's never been behind. He's always understood the offense. That, for me, has always been the most important part about playing quarterback at the SEC level, be it Georgia or somewhere else. And Smart wouldn't say that if he didn't believe it, because by saying that, he's sort of throwing logs in the fire of what could be a lot of hype for Justin Fields during the offseason. That's a perfect chance to sort of, ramp some of that down. He chooses not to. So I take it as a pretty significant compliment that Kirby says, this guy's not behind. He understands the offense. That was what gave Fromm a leg up over Eason last year, but Fromm doesn't have that same leg up over Justin Fields, at least comparatively speaking, because Fields is also maybe a little bit of a film room runner.
Yeah, I mean, I actually looked more into it, though, that I thought Kirby Smart was trying to kind of tamper down expectations for Justin Fields, but to me, he kind of ramped him up in a way where he says, listen, you guys said the same thing last spring. Jake Fromm had a good spring game. Jacob Eason didn't come out and have a good game, but Jacob Eason was still our starter. Guess what? Jake Fromm was a starter for the rest of the season. And so I don't think he tampered them down like I think he wanted to. In my opinion, I think he's going to have to do everything he can to kind of say, listen, this is QB1 and QB2. But I'm just telling you, if at some point that Jake Fromm struggles, and we saw the ability for him to do that on Saturday, then this is going to transform into something bigger than he wants it to.
On Facebook, Philip Joseph Young Jr. says, redshirt Fields, first year, but he'll play for us for 4 years. He's the future, although I also like Fromm. So I don't think you can redshirt Justin Fields, and it may end up being that you're right, that both these quarterbacks can't coincide together the next 3 years. The truth is, and y'all see the shirt that I'm wearing today, I'm not the least bit worried about 3 years from now.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to tell you. Those people in the comment section that want to stir it up and say it's a bad thing that Georgia may have incumbent starter Jake Fromm and a very good backup in Justin Fields, you are deluding yourself if you think that. Kirby Smart's got the biggest smile on his face in the world. It's never a bad thing to have a good player. And Kirby's got two of them at least, the quarterback position. That's not a bad thing. I don't think Kirby Smart's worried about 3 years from now. I don't think that Georgia fans are worried about 3 years from now. Somebody loses the job, somebody transfers, somebody gets their feelings hurt. That's something to deal with 36 months from now. For now, moving into 2018, Georgia's better because it has Justin Fields. This kind of insurance policy as a backup, and I think that Fields is the backup, but to have that kind of insurance policy as a backup keeps you in that national championship conversation.
I completely agree with you. It's not a bad thing at all. And I think that a lot of people tried to make it out to be a bad thing for Jalen Hurts in Alabama last year. You saw what happened. They needed 2 quarterbacks in order to get the distance and win the national title like they did. And so I definitely don't think it's a bad thing. But I will say this. I wonder if it's a bad thing for Jake Fromm. I really do. I wonder if it's a bad thing for him in the end that you have the number 1 player in the country sitting behind him that looked very good during G-Day and has another dimension to his game that Jake Fromm does not.
Katie McCarty on the YouTube comment section says redshirting Justin Fields is just stupid. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're both going to play. And you talk about, Fromm in that regard. This is where that sort of cliche of a guy being a gamer, a guy being, all those, sort of like, coachy cliches that get used. I don't think that Jake Fromm is the least bit worried about Justin Fields. I think sometimes one of the things that we do poorly is try to attach some sort of narrative and meaning to everything. Somehow Fromm played poorly at G-Day because he feels Justin Fields breathing down his neck. Chances are it was just a bad game, just something that happened. And if Georgia's running the foot, because remember, Georgia only ran the ball 14 times on both sides there.
Yeah.
They got 2,000 pounds of offensive line. A huge stable of backs. They're going to run the ball plenty during regular games, which is a little bit different offense than what Fromm is being asked to run on Saturday.
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, they were definitely trying to air it out. And what's interesting, too, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Fromm and Jalen Hurts' numbers were like exactly the same, like 19 of 38. I think both of them were come Saturday. And so there was that dimension of you should be able to run the ball better. I don't think Georgia's offensive line looked as good as I expect them to, and I didn't think the same thing in Alabama.
So it's very, very fitting that the first Twitter comment that I read here on SEC Country Live comes from our buddy Cliff Nelson, who was one of our early adopters on Facebook, on the YouTube feed when that first got going, and on now Twitter here today. And he says the last thing that Jake Fromm wants to see is that LSU defense. LSU also had its spring game on Saturday. We'll talk more about that. And thanks, y'all, for sort of being some of our beta testers here for the brand new comment section there on the SEC Country Live broadcast on Twitter on the SEC Country Twitter page. Boy, we are loaded today. Each and every one of these topics is something we could seemingly talk 15, 20 minutes about.
Very true.
Let me move on to another, I think, red hot one here. Jeromy Pruitt was pretty intense after the Tennessee spring game. We're going to hear some of what he said about some of his own players later on. But how about this on the fans? He was asked one of these, this is item number 3 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. He was asked one of these sort of, really pretty fluffy questions of, hey, did you see your fans turn out today? How'd you feel about all that? What was it like doing your first Vol walk? Well, he took what was supposed to be a fluffy question and turned it into a pretty blunt answer. And I got to tell you, the reaction to this is a little bit different than I expected it to be. Let you hear the audio, and then Mike and I will both react to it, and then we'll talk about what Tennessee fans are saying about this. Here is Tennessee coach Jeromy Pruitt with some tough words for Vols fans.
Thought the Vol walk was spectacular. I don't know how many fans we had. I think what was it? You guys probably know. Anybody know the number?
Yeah,
65,000. Well, to me, it's kind of like our football team for the fans. The ones that were here, I'm proud they were here. They're fired up. They're ready to get going. Okay, and then there were some people that wasn't here that had legitimate reasons they couldn't be here. All right, and then there were some people that wasn't here that, why wasn't they here? It's kind of like our football team. So I think we all need to look in the mirror and see who we want to be.
So Corey Tester on our Facebook comment section, and Corey's a big Tennessee fan. He says, I'm all for it, guys. I think it's going to be, actually, I started reading the wrong comment. Corey says, I'm all for it, guys. We got to get everybody involved. I was there. That's in reference to what Jeromy Pruitt just said about for the Vols fans who weren't there. Some of them didn't have a good reason not to be there.
Yeah.
And some of the ones who were there maybe weren't there for all the right reasons, or kind of everything that Jeromy Pruitt just said. And Mike, I thought that the majority of Tennessee fans would reflect what Corey Tester just said on Facebook of, give them hell, coach. These Tennessee fans got to get behind the program. That's not necessarily the sum total of the response that I've seen on message boards. Some Vols fans were unhappy about this. I thought that Pruitt kind of split the atom on this pretty well, saying, hey, the people were here, good job. Some of the people that weren't here had legitimate reasons. I thought he was sort of identifying a group of people that it was fair to criticize, the people who just sort of chose not to come. But this did not sit well with all Tennessee fans.
Yeah, it was interesting, too, because I started to give my 2 cents on this on Twitter when it all started popping up, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to read and see what Tennessee fans think. And Tennessee fans were going at other Tennessee fans, and there was some Tennessee fans that were saying, you haven't given us anything to cheer about yet. And there were other Tennessee fans saying that you're the definition of a bandwagon fan. Like the fans that don't show up unless you have something to cheer for, you're a bandwagon fan. And while we're seeing so much bad weather around the SEC and a lack of people showing up to Auburn and Mizzou and Arkansas, 70 and sunny in Knoxville. And I'm going to tell you right now, all apologies to Tennessee fans that were there. There's no way there were 64,000 people in that.
Is that right? I didn't see the game.
No way there were 64,000 people.
Here's Tony Elam also on Facebook saying, get the weak softies out of Knoxville. He means bad fans. Pruitt hit the nail on the head. And once again, what Tony's saying here is an example of what I thought that Tennessee fans might do. I thought that Pruitt's words, sort of surprising, unorthodox, might be a rallying cry for other Tennessee fans. But it seems to, as you said, become a bit of a wedge issue, dividing Tennessee fans. And spring games, especially for a brand new head coach, are supposed to be a uniting effort.
Yeah.
Did Pruitt misstep by saying that?
I don't think he did at all. I actually loved his words.
But if he divided the fan base, how could he not?
Because I think that other fan base is going to come around once he does start winning. And I think these fans are going to show up. But I think he made his message very clear. And we've said this all along. I said this right when Jeromy Pruitt got this job. He's not going to be trying to make some people happy and some others, happy and different. He's going to say what's on his mind. Jeromy Pruitt is the kind of guy that always says what's on his mind. And much like my outlook on the Tennessee program, Jeromy Pruitt said it in his presser yesterday. He said, listen, I come from Bama in the mid-'90s. Tennessee was something better than it is now, and I expect everybody to be a part of this turnaround, and I just don't feel like that he thinks that he got that out of UT fans. I don't think it's a dividing wedge. I think he's kind of bringing them together and saying, listen, you know what? It is going to take everybody.
But right now you don't have everybody. I mean, you've got Marshall McCancer who says, I'm a true Vol fan, but I live in Atlanta. I could have been there. But I get what he's saying. Go Pruitt. In other words, he'd like to have been there if he could. Malachi Morgan also says they tried too hard to hype this game for more than it was. Based on recent years, you can't blame a lot of fans for not wanting to go see it yet. A decently successful season is going to change that. I mean, I think that even though that this is not what I initially thought would happen, if you're causing Tennessee fans to argue with each other on social media, I think you've made a misstep here because you need them all swimming in the same direction. And people are going to say that I'm just stirring up trouble by saying this, but honesty compels me to admit there's no way Philip Fulmer liked this.
No.
And listen, if it's a Fulmer versus Pruitt battle, I'm probably siding with Pruitt. I think his energy is what Tennessee needs. But this showdown that you and I think, both had predicted that eventually Philip Fulmer and Jeromy Pruitt are going to be at odds and maybe even at loggerheads at some point, I think it starts with this. There's no way the very old school, traditional Philip Fulmer would have appreciated what is a pretty outside-the-box move of really hammering your fans and saying, some of y'all got to get with the program, essentially chastising them. There's no way Fulmer could have liked that, and there's no way that Fulmer could have thought that was the right thing to do.
I agree with you. I think there's no shot that Philip Fulmer thought, boy, I'm glad he came out and said this, but I think that's what the unifying factor is in this, though. You have these fans that have been around this program, and Tennessee fans are so hungry to win that what you have is these fans that have been around the program, and they're tired of the Butch Jones positivity talk. They're tired of the Philip Fulmer, well, I'm going to be a part of this, bringing it back to greatness. They needed something new in there. They need somebody that has tough words for this fan base and expects more. And I'm just telling you, I think it's unifying. I think it's going to bring more fans out of the woodwork that are like, you know what, he's right. If I'm going to be a part of this, I need to hop on.
So how about James Perkins? You think I'm trying to stir it up? James says Fulmer's somewhere rubbing his hands together and smiling, essentially acting like this just gets me closer to being Tennessee head coach again.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, it's definitely possible. I'm just telling you right now, I think that the words that were being spoken, I'm not saying all of them, and maybe it is 50-50 right down the middle, but I think more people prefer to hear that than they would the stuff that Butch Jones was saying before.
How about Maurice Carter, who's a Georgia fan, Jeremy Pettis, who's an Alabama fan, these both on Facebook as well, kind of talking about their track record of having seen Pruitt work for them, a guy with a reputation of being a bit of a hothead. Is this an example of Pruitt's, I don't want to say temper, but temperament getting the best of him here?
I'm not ready to say it's getting the best of him because I agree with what he said. Now, could you look back on this in a couple of years and say, boy, he probably shouldn't have said that? Possibly. I mean, there's always the chance that your head coach and his personality won't fit in with the fan base, especially when you've got an Alabama guy going up to Tennessee and something you never thought would see happen. But I just think that Jeromy Pruitt saying, listen, I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to say the things that I want to say. And Jeromy Pruitt said this. It reminds me of Nick Saban's opening presser when he got to Alabama. It's going to take everybody. And the people that weren't in that stadium to say, whoa, big deal, we didn't show up. He's selling these recruits on, boy, we got a passionate fan base. We've got 100,000. We saw the Tennessee Stadium hype video for Neyland last week. The hype video, boy, 100,000 fans that are on top of this stadium saying all these things. He's selling that to recruits. And yet when some of them got on campus this weekend, maybe a little bit of a letdown, half full stadium.
On YouTube, Shannon Burgess says that the Twitter video feed maybe not quite as people just like the YouTube video feed. They think that's a good video feed. Maybe the Twitter video feed not quite living up to what the YouTube video feed has been. I don't know if that's just a difference in the platform or what, but we'll take a look at that and kind of see how it goes. I appreciate y'all trying it out, though. That's a huge help to us for sure. Appreciate those comments and everything else. We'll keep that going here today on SEC Country Live all day long as we broadcast on Twitter for the very first time as we continue to try to blaze new trails, open up new frontiers here in SEC Country Live. Let's do item number 4 on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. Another spring game over the weekend and more talk about quarterbacks, this time at LSU. And I don't know if this is good news, but one quarterback outplayed the other two in the LSU spring game, and I don't think it was the one that either of us would have expected. Here is Ed Orgeron saying, I tried to tell y'all that the spring game was exactly like it's been all spring long, in which there is no resolution coming soon for this quarterback position. Here is Coach O after the LSU spring game.
I think you've all seen tonight what I've been telling you about the quarterbacks. Sometimes they're doing well, sometimes they're not. I thought Justin McMillan tonight had a good game. I thought he extended plays with his feet. When he was in, he moved the football when him and Clyde were back there. I thought that the offense was moving the football down the field.
So Justin McMillan outplays Lowell Narcisse, who you and I talked about a lot last week. Miles Brennan as well, apparently, who we talked about a good bit the week before. At one point in time, I declared Brennan the winner of this thing, then backtracked. I did. I flip-flopped and said, no, maybe Lowell Narcisse got a chance. And now it's Justin McMillan, who I had totally written off, playing better in Baton Rouge. What do you think?
It's so interesting to me, too, because I've had this kind of depth chart in my mind, and it's moved along. We've heard stuff from Orgeron. We've heard stuff from other players. The depth chart did this on Saturday for me. I mean, I thought that Brennan was going to be the guy. I've heard that he throws this crisp ball, which, by the way, he does. Throws a beautiful ball, has an arm. I'm not sure 195 pounds is it. I'm thinking more like 170. I mean, he is slight, to say the least. Narcisse was kind of in that middle, and he kind of stayed where I thought he would. He was kind of what it tilted on. But McMillan, of everybody, I thought, man, he came out, he had some zip on the ball. He looked like he was in command of the offense. He looked like he picked up yards where he needed to with his legs. And I thought he really gelled with the wide receivers. And so going from third really to first in my mind of who's going to be the quarterback at LSU, I don't know that anybody really distanced themselves, but I do agree with Ed Orgeron. I think they've got some good options. I don't think this is years past where it's like, man, who's going to run this offense? I think they've got some good options, and I like what I saw from Steve Ensminger, too.
Let me get some of these YouTube comments. We've got a lot of LSU stuff coming in here. Katie McCarty says, actually, I'm trying to find this. Katie McCarty says, the only thing that scares me at LSU is that Coach Orgeron's always so positive. A coach with a great team is usually negative. That's kind of an interesting statement to make. Cliff Nelson says that Justin McMillan did look good, but Brennan throws a better ball, and Narcisse still has the strongest arm and can run better than both. Here's my issue with that. And, you're not an old married guy yet. You will be one day. But you know how, like, when you and your significant other trying to go find a restaurant, so when you're trying to choose between 3 restaurants, it feels like the chances of sort of agreeing on a good restaurant is a lot harder than if you can just whittle it down to 2. We're going to go eat, Mexican or Italian. We're going to go to the steakhouse, the pizza joint. So if you can whittle it down to 2, I feel like you've got a better chance of making a satisfying choice. When it's, we're going to go to restaurant A, B, or C, it's just a little bit harder to sort of arrive at something. What would concern me about the LSU quarterback situation, and I've sort of been, just flailing wildly here trying to make a guess about this thing, and I've been wrong every single time. But the one thing I think that LSU fans would probably join me in saying is if you could have whittled it down to 2 by the end of the spring, you're in a better position for the summer. The fact that you're going into summer trying to give 3 guys reps during practice, dude, those are reps you got to get ready to play Miami eventually. You can't be choosing between 3 quarterbacks. That's what worries me about LSU, is you're still trying to choose between 3 quarterbacks. It's not a multiple choice test. Can you give me a true or false here?
Yeah, I think it was tough. And listen, I think that Brennan really could have done some good things and started to distance himself with a good showing. But Brennan really, the only thing in his corner is that he should be deadly accurate with the ball. Like, that's Brennan's thing, right? That's what he's better than the other 2 at. He's accurate with the football. He didn't look that accurate on Saturday. Now, Keep in mind, they had a ton of problems with the offensive line. The second string offensive line at LSU is really rough right now. They had a couple of their starting tackles that were out for the game, but I just didn't see that from Brennan. If that's what you're going to hang your hat on is the accuracy out of Miles Brennan, I didn't see enough to really keep pace with the other two. So I'm not so sure that they didn't whittle it down to two. I don't know if it's going to come out right.
Let me give you 2 quick YouTube comments, and we're going to start moving on here because we got to kind of rock and roll here a little bit. Shannon Burgess says the body language looked on the sidelines like people are gravitating towards McMillan a little bit more.
Yeah.
If that's true, that matters to me. Leadership's crucial here, and the guy that the players are sort of gravitating towards, there is some value to that.
Yeah, Esteban Aceves says in the comment section on YouTube, Brennan thinks he was a shoe-in as a starter. He better humble himself and get it together. That's coming from LSU fans. That's not me saying that, and I'm just telling you right now that that's what I'm kind of trying to say. I thought Miles Brennan going in, clear number 1 favorite for me, did not look like it Saturday.
One more quick YouTube comment, 98 Sports Talk, referencing what Ed Orgeron had said, essentially making a promise that the quarterback of the future was on campus. That promise seems ludicrous now, given the fact that we're so undecided here moving towards the summer. And I do think Orgeron's gravitas takes a bit of a ding when you can't live up to your word on that as quickly as he's been proven wrong.
I'm not ready to bury him yet on that because I liked what I saw from McMillan. Now, what's crazy about that is, like I said, I had McMillan as number 3 going into watching the game, but I really liked what I saw from him. I thought that all of them made some quality throws. I also like what I saw from Narcisse. But I'm not ready to say that maybe that guy's not on campus because the offensive line was so bad. And at times, Clavon Chason made some of these guys look like they didn't even belong in Division I. I mean, their defensive line was so absolutely dominant that I don't know if I'm ready to make really a judgment factor on all these quarterbacks.
Another SEC team that had a spring game on over the weekend was Mississippi State. Let's make them the subject of item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And we'll get into the goings-on there in Stark Vegas for the spring game. But it reminds me of something that our buddy Brandon Walker, who you may have already seen in our comments section today on Facebook, he generally parks in Facebook most of the time representing the SEC Country official account. Well, he also does our More Cowbell, Mississippi State SEC Country podcast. And in a recent episode, when you sort of think about what Mississippi State was going to put on display for its spring game and what it may show this fall in 2018, Brandon a little fed up with some of the naysayers who assume that this Mississippi State is just like Mississippi State teams of the past. I love this energy from Brandon. Take a listen to this.
Came to Starkville, and he decided to pick Mississippi State as a team he thinks is going to raise a lot of eyebrows in the SEC this year. And why does he think that? Because he actually came to Starkville, talked to the team, talked to the coaches, looked at the roster, and put in some thought instead of leaning on his old understanding of this is poor old Mississippi State, so they're not going to be any good because I'm too stupid to think of anything else.
How much do you love Brandon Walker? I mean, how much do you love Brandon Walker? Now, our audio is kind of cutting out there at the beginning, but that was Gene Chizik he was referencing, coming to Starkville, liking what he has seen from Mississippi State. There's going to be a smattering of writers on social media and around the internet who sort of assume that, as I said, that this will be, and I love Brandon's description here of the sort of poor old Mississippi State of the past, the same team that in the Dan Mullen era was generally picked last in the SEC West, almost never actually finished there, but that's where they were picked. Is this a rallying cry for Mississippi State that under Joe Moorhead there's not going to be the same old Mississippi State anymore?
I think it definitely is, and I think that, listen, I don't want to pat Brandon Walker on the back too much because I'm probably sure that he's running the Facebook comment account today. I don't want to talk too good about him, but he's right. I mean, this is, if you haven't taken a look at the players at Mississippi State, and if you haven't taken a look really closely at the players in Starkville, then you're probably thinking Mississippi State 5th, 6th as far as the SEC West goes. It's not going to happen. Now, I don't know that Joe Moorhead is Dan Mullen. I'm not ready to say that. I don't know what Joe Moorhead is as a head coach. That's why I'm not picking Mississippi State like second or possibility to have the upset in the West. But this is not, your dad's Mississippi State football team. There is so much talent on this roster this year that they really raise some eyebrows. Like I said last week, raise some eyebrows is not going to be good enough for this team, in my opinion. I think you got to do more than raise the eyebrows, and I think that's how good this team is.
People loving Brandon Walker in the comment section. That's always nice to see. I guess my problem in Mississippi State is this. Yes, there is a pretty interesting collection of talent, especially if it's a healthy Nick Fitzgerald at quarterback. But to try to be talking big with the idea of a 10-win season, about really kind of moving up in the upper tier of the SEC, time to a year when you have not just a first-year head coach, but a first-year head coach ever, a guy, at least in terms of the SEC level, not had that head coaching experience. He was most recently offensive coordinator at Penn State. That seems like a bit of a tough sell. A little easier to sort of talk about Mississippi State taking the leap forward if it's still Dan Mullen coaching there or some sort of experienced coach. but the inexperienced Moorhead makes this a hard idea for me to buy into.
It really does. And I was actually impressed with how their offense was running on Saturday. And by the way, I mentioned this on Twitter earlier today. Obviously I'm going to side with the two quarterbacks in Tuscaloosa, possibly in Athens. Keaton Thompson might be the best backup quarterback in the SEC. He might be. Anybody who watched the first half of Mississippi State spring game, I'm just going to tell you, the kid was lighting it up. Now, you watch the second half, and obviously you don't get that feeling, but the way their offense was running gave me reason to think that Joe Moorhead really is going to hit the ground running, that all the talent is going to help out, that the two-headed running back core that they have right now really is going to do some great things this year. And so I don't give the benefit of the doubt to Joe Moorhead just yet because I don't know anything about him, but the small sliver that I did get Saturday makes me think that there's not going to be that much of a drop-off for them.
Brian Van Dusen on Facebook says this is all setting up for Mississippi State for a fall, and I think that's where Brandon's point comes in about the same old media, where a lot of these teams at the sort of middle tier, bottom tier of the SEC can surprise you when you expect little from you, when you expect little from them, but maybe not live up to expectations when you're asking a lot. And this is one of those years in which more is being asked of Mississippi State, and if I had to guess, I don't quite think they're going to be equal to that challenge. There's not room for everybody in the SEC West to be good. And with Auburn and Alabama as good as I expect them to be, I'm not quite sure how much more room there is for another double-digit win team.
Yeah, and I think what's tough for me is that you look at it and you're going to have all these expectations on Mississippi State when really they're just now learning the offense. Like I said, I was high on the offense. I thought Joe Moorhead did a good job, but you're talking about a brand new head coach, and he does have a ton of returning players. My question for Mississippi State fans is, if Joe Moorhead doesn't do that well this year, how low are you going to be on him next year? If he had all the players in the world to do it in 2018,
good point.
How low are you going to be if he doesn't get it done heading into 2019?
Let's do item number 6 here in our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. What a move it was for SEC teams in recruiting over the weekend. You briefly, for a moment, had Alabama back in the spot it had become accustomed to for years and years, the number one class in the country. You've got Texas A&M also making a big push into the top 2 here. Teams like Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Georgia, all right there in the top 10. In the early stage of this 2019 recruiting cycle, SEC teams are dominant.
Yeah, I thought it was huge for Bama. And we've talked about Paul Tyson and Talia Tagovailoa, both quarterbacks probably headed to Bama. Talia commits on Saturday at the 8A game. You were number one for about 24 hours till Brandon Gant from South Florida all of a sudden decommits. He was at Florida State over the weekend at Alabama. But I thought, honestly, the biggest commitment of the weekend, and I think it was over the weekend, was Kenyon Jackson at Texas A&M from Grayson High School. All of a sudden, Owen Popo's decision coming up looks a lot less and less like he might be choosing Auburn, where all his teammates were offered. Maybe he's headed to Athens after all.
Yeah, there has been some movement in that regard over the last bit here. What Texas A&M is doing with the on the recruiting trail has certainly been impressive, and obviously Georgia does have May's first circled as that day. Georgia does not get a commitment coming off of G-Day. Alabama had 4 coming off of its 8A performance here. So if you're an Alabama fan, you feel good about that. I thought the most impressive thing about Alabama's recruiting performance over the weekend was getting Ishmael Sopsher, and I'm sure I'm butchering his name, the big defensive tackle from out of the state of Louisiana, from Amite, right there where Devontae Smith is from. Getting him on campus this weekend, I thought it was a big get for Alabama on its A-Day game.
Yeah, they definitely, listen, Alabama had some guys that I actually think Alabama's staff actually thought it was going to be an even bigger weekend than it was. I mean, I think you had some guys, and I can't remember the guy's name right now, he's going to commit on July 4th. He was coming off saying, I think I moved up my timeline. And then he has to take a breather and say, boy, I've got to think about this for a minute. But you had a strong weekend as far as Tuscaloosa goes. I think that A&M has really, for my money, made their presence felt. I mean, I think Jimbo Fisher, you can't say enough about the movement he's making at Texas A&M.
And for me, that's real momentum. We talk a lot about these first-year coaches. We just talked about Joe Moorhead a moment ago. And at schools where you sort of think of recruiting as being more of a priority, like Tennessee and Florida, I think a lot of what the momentum that's sort of viewed around those programs, I have to admit, it feels manufactured to me. But what Jimbo Fisher's doing at Texas A&M is not fake. It's not inauthentic. It's real. Kenyatta Watson, guys like that. When you're bringing those guys into your program, you're doing something real at that point in time. And I think that Jimbo Fisher's a force to be reckoned with. That, to me, is the off-season story right now, is how quickly he's sort of changing the narrative around Texas A&M from a finesse-oriented, Kevin Sumlin-led team, the kind of team that has the same kind of backbone as the one that he won a national championship with at Florida State in 2013.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I mean, obviously I'm high on Dan Mullen at Florida, but Jimbo Fisher is doing at Texas A&M what a lot of Florida fans wish Dan Mullen was doing at Florida, and that's winning the state, right? I mean, Jimbo Fisher's coming in and saying, I don't care what Tom Herman's doing up in Texas. I don't care if you got a top 3 class at all. I'm about to recruit the state of Texas. That's exactly what he's doing. Dan Mullen hasn't done that so much in Florida. Now, obviously, you've got a lot of schools in Florida and Texas, but that's not what Dan Mullen's doing. Not to say he's doing a bad job, But I think you wish that you were skewing the way that right now Jimbo's doing at Texas A&M.
I mean, I'll say it flatly and bluntly. Florida's messing around with way too many three-star players. There's too much, online chatter on Florida about the number 700 and something ranked player in America.
Right.
Florida's got no business recruiting players of that caliber. If you want to be back in the national championship business, you got to recruit the same players that Urban Meyer and Steve Spurrier were recruiting. Right now, Florida has just not been doing that.
Yeah, they definitely have it. And you're right. I mean, when you're competing against the South Florida and the Central Florida and you're Florida, you can make your name brand a little bit more known. I still think Dan Mullen's going to get there. I'm not really happy with what he's done so far.
Item number 7 on our
recruiting-wise.
Item number 7 on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. Speaking of the Georgia Bulldogs, who we mentioned briefly a moment ago, it was as packed a house as you can have in Sanford Stadium on Saturday. The West End Zone being reconstructed, so those seats weren't available. But the crowd of more than 82,000 saw Georgia's G-Day game. When the game was over, Kirby Smart was certainly thankful for the fans who were in attendance. Here's Kirby.
What an awesome atmosphere. I mean, I think we say that every year, but I certainly think that was an incredible atmosphere. I tell you, the new pathway that we had to go for the dog walk was really neat. It was in a lot more shaded area. We thought there were tons of people there lining it, and I know our players really enjoyed it, and I really just want to thank our fans for being out there that early. It's probably a little warmer than I anticipated, but I thought they were awesome.
This is the second time since Kirby's been coach of Georgia for the 3 years he's been there that Georgia's had more than 80,000 for a spring game. More than twice, really, what you'd have seen in a typical year before Kirby Smart came to UGA. How is it that there is so much more energy and enthusiasm around this event than what used to be there? Well, Kirby Smart gave a pretty simple answer to that question.
I just think that people like Georgia football. I mean, why, when you have an opportunity on this nice spring day to come to Athens, I know I'd be dying to come if I lived anywhere in the state or in a 5-hour radius. Get out of the house, get the kids out of the house, come watch a game and see the new guys out there, see who the new faces are. I think some of it's recruiting, but I just think people enjoy football in Georgia, and they want to come watch it. I'm glad they do, because the impact that it has on recruiting, I can't tell you how many recruits are out there going, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Just can't get over it. But it's the norm here. It's the way it should be. I mean, we've got a great fan base, and they turn out for it, and we try to put a good product out there for them and make it a good, entertaining game. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Miriam Martin Corbin in our Facebook comment section says it was a true game day atmosphere. Loved it. Dog Nation is hungry to see their dogs. Rick Keene, who's a Florida fan, said the reason why so many people were there is because there's nothing else better to do in the state of Georgia. You were not a Georgia fan. What did you make of the showing of UGA fans here for this?
I thought it was completely fitting for the season that Georgia had last year. I expected that stadium to be completely full. It was a historic run for Georgia last year, and that spring game in a lot of ways, while it can gear you up on the recruiting side of things before you get good, it can kind of be a celebratory atmosphere after you have had a good run. And so I completely expected it. You know, we have two different kind of crowds right now at spring games, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, I think you had 74K at Alabama. They're obviously celebrating a national championship team. The same thing going on with all the things that were happening at Georgia. But then it's like you said, you have big crowds at Florida right now. You had a big crowd at Texas A&M. You have crowds that are hungry for what comes next. So I thought it was great for Georgia. Obviously, you know, he talks about the weather right there. The weather was great throughout the Southeast this weekend. And so it just kind of all came together for a lot of those programs that had their game Saturday.
Corey Tester says it's bandwagoners from everywhere, BA, LOL, which is kind of a funny line. Josh Trotter says, though, it was an amazing thing to see for real. Vince Blank says, does Georgia get a trophy for attendance? No, but they did get SEC championship trophies, rings on Saturday. John Wilson says Georgia's becoming a national brand. I mean, for me, I do think you can draw a line between the kind of energy that you can sort of build around a spring game like this and what you're later able to do in recruiting. Recruits said that about the 93,000 that Georgia put there in 2016, and I do think for Georgia, that national brand is growing based on like the 50 grand who, you know, went to South Bend to see Georgia against Notre Dame, the travel to the Rose Bowl, events like this. I think there's no doubt that the national brand of Georgia is growing.
I think it is growing, and I think that it's interesting you do bring up that 93K day from 2016 because I think that Kirby Smart did such a good job of building that, right? Like he came out and was talking on radio station, boy, we want 93,000 there. I don't know that Jeromy Pruitt did as much probably as Kirby Smart did. You know, in year one, you're trying to build up the momentum. You're trying to make things back into a national brand. I'm not sure Jeromy Pruitt actually did all those things that Kirby Smart did, and maybe that's a page that he takes for the future.
Speaking of Jeromy Pruitt, let's talk about him again for item number 8 on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. Pruitt, earlier in our show, we played some audio from him, harsh words for Tennessee fans, maybe even harsher words for some Tennessee players. Yep. And I found this to be really interesting and the kind of thing that frankly becomes pretty tough to walk back. Here is Jeromy Pruitt using a tough word to describe the performance of at least one of the teams during his annual Tennessee spring game. Here's Pruitt.
As you see, some guys competing pretty hard. They may not be doing things perfect, but they're headed in the right direction. You know, there's something you can build off of. And then I saw a couple of guys out there today just flat out quit. You call it what you want to. I'm going to say they quit because that's what I saw.
He said some of his players flat out quit. And then, we didn't have time to play all this audio for you, but he goes on to sort of read the stat sheet pointing out disparity in rushing yards, disparity in tackles, disparity in things like that. First day on the job, for all intents and purposes,
right,
saying that some of your players quit. On the one hand, that's setting a high standard. But boy, there's not a lot of room to go somewhere else if they don't respond here.
No, I absolutely loved it. And how many times have I told you the story about Nick Saban saying, listen, if you don't get on board right now, we're going to find somebody to replace you in the end. And I think that's exactly what Jeromy Pruitt was saying up at Tennessee right now. And he's right. I mean, there's 12 guys not playing in the Tennessee spring game because of injury. There's 14 more signees showing up in the summer, and I think 3 or 4 more graduate transfers that are going to be showing up in June and July. He's going to find somebody to replace you if you don't want to play the way he wants you to. And I think he's talking specifically about some of the guys on that defensive line and in the front seven, because that offensive line should not have been that good. I think you got to give credit to Will Friend and that offensive line over the weekend. Completely dominated the line of scrimmage against that defensive front that should be one of the strengths of that Tennessee football team. That too was in the crosshairs for me with Jeromy Pruitt.
98 Sports Talk says on YouTube that Pruitt may be too honest to be a head coach. Morgan Recton says he needs to call the Tennessee players out. Tennessee needs that right now. Enrique Murillo also agrees, says that Tennessee really needs this honest, tough love. But to make the comparison that you made of your time in Alabama when Saban told some players, when I can replace you, I will, the difference between Saban then, Pruitt now is, Saban was an experienced head coach, been the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, had won a national championship at LSU. Pruitt's a brand new coach, and the recruiting pipeline that's in place for Tennessee, not as significant as it would be for Saban in Alabama. The problem here is he may have called some of his players out as quitters, and he may not quite have that easy pathway to replacing them the way that Saban did at Alabama. The problem is that with his own words here, and I like him too in terms of setting a high standard for the program, but there's an element in which that Pruitt sort of backs himself into a corner. It'd be like if I said, hey, you say that one more time, we're going to fight. Well, we're about to fight because you've sort of moved yourself to the end of the red line here. When Pruitt says these guys quit, well, you can't abide quitting, so you either kick them off the team, call them out as frauds, or you sort of start to become the fraud.
Right. Yeah, no, it's kind of like the Jim Rome, hey, call me Chris one more time again.
Yeah, that's like the old Jim Rome thing from the 90s.
I absolutely
that's right.
love that video. But I think you're right, and I think that's why Jeromy Pruitt was careful not to name names, right? I think that's why he went in there and said, I'm not going to name any names, but some guys out there look to me like they quit. And he also goes on, and this is what the best part to me was, and it wasn't so much about recruiting, but I do agree with you. I mean, he's got to be able to recruit at a high level if he's going to replace everybody. But he said one thing that really jumped out at me. Peer pressure can create some of these opportunities.
That's true.
He pointed at peer pressure, and I guarantee you what's going on today in Knoxville right now is the people that did quit are being highlighted on a highlight film right now. And guess what? That film's going to be played in front of that entire football team in that good, bad, and ugly film session today. And Jeromy Pruitt's going to point his laser up at the camera, and he's going to ask that guy why he quit on his teammates. And that right there is going to generate the competitiveness that you want out of your football team.
James Crump says Tennessee's 3 years away, may not get to a bowl game this season. I think that's a fairly honest assessment from James.
Yeah.
If you are 3 years away from bringing in better players, the kind of guys that can not look like quitters on a spring game, boy, that's a long time to kind of be calling what's currently there not good enough, but not bringing in upgraded talent.
Yeah.
Bright fires have a tendency to burn out the quickest. I hope that Pruitt's fire doesn't burn out too fast here at Tennessee.
I agree with you because it's like you just mentioned. This is not a one-year turnaround like Saban at Bama. This is not a 1 year we're going to have the number one recruiting class and we're going to get back to where we want to be. It is going to take a little bit of a slower turn. I mean, you're going to have to, first of all, climb back into the top 10 in recruiting, and then climb back into the top 5, and then you're going to have to develop those players, which we don't even know if he can do yet. But I tend to think that he's asking that of his players, and I think Jeromy Pruitt knows how to get it out of most of them.
Speaking of recruits, let's talk about item number 9 on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. E.J. Smith is one of the elite, I think probably a defensive back prospect for the class of 2020. Some debate about what position he might play. He also happens to be the father of the very famous, great former Florida Gator, Emmitt Smith, and also Dallas Cowboys great there as well. Well, on Saturday in Athens with EJ visiting the campus, Emmitt Smith took a time to pose with Georgia coach Kirby Smart, and he did so wearing a Georgia hat. What do you think, Mike, the Florida fans think about saying their all-time great, repping the G there?
Yeah, it's got to be a little bit of a nauseous feeling, doesn't it, for some of those Florida fans to be able to see that. And if I'm not mistaken, Deion Sanders' son was in attendance
there
as well.
Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting dynamic. And I think E.J. Smith is in the class of 2020, right? So he's like an all-purpose back out of Texas, going to be a top 200 player possibly.
I think he'll probably play a different position in college, at least at Georgia.
Right.
But he's certainly a guy that capable of playing potentially a couple positions.
And I kind of love it from Emmitt Smith. I've had a chance to meet Emmitt Smith. I've had a chance to talk to Emmitt Smith. He's a great dude. And so I kind of love it, the fact that he's like, listen, all parties aside, I'm going to come to whoever is best for my son to play football. And if that's Georgia, good for you, Emmitt Smith, for being able to do that. I still think he ends up at Florida, but I think it's nice for one day to be able to put it aside.
I will tell you, Georgia did offer him before Florida, and I don't think he's going to choose Georgia over Florida either. I'm not quite sure where he ranks on Georgia's recruiting priority list right now, but with all that turmoil going on at Florida, it was another example of some recruiting stuff they missed out on. They were late extending some of those offers to 2020 kids because they were still trying to figure out what they're going to do about Jim McElwain.
Right, yeah, and it's definitely going to be a work in progress too for Dan Mullen, but I don't think there's any way that you miss out. I think that if you miss out on E.J. Smith, and he is a big prospect, and it looks like he's going to be, I think that really spells a lot of trouble for Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I do too. And part of this, take the famous last name out of this, just think about him as a recruiting priority. Part of Florida's problem is they're too busy trying to put out the current fires to sort of do the long-range recruiting. You know, they're hiring a coach when other people were making offers to 2020 recruits. Florida was still trying to lock down its 2018 class when everybody else was recruiting 2019 kids. Florida's just about a half year behind on everything right now, and your roster gets penalized when you're constantly trying to just put out the next fire.
Yeah, no, this is something you heard a little bit of too with Mississippi State fans about Dan Mullen. And listen, I think that the Florida in a lot of different ways does recruit itself, but this is something you've got to climb on top of if you're Dan Mullen. You've got to get him down in Florida. And it's like I said, this is all hearsay, this is all guessing in the end, but I'm just telling you right now, if you start missing on guys like Emmitt Smith's son, I just don't think Dan Mullen doing that is going to be able to get Florida back to where they want to be.
And I know that some Florida fans are kind of criticizing Emmitt for this a little bit. You know, listen, here's what I think really goes on here. When you touched on this, you don't have kids. I do. I already understand this, even though my son will never be the kind of player that E.J. Smith probably is. You do anything for your kids. You know, there's no hat I wouldn't put on for my kids. And I'm not putting on one of these other SEC hats for y'all in the comment section. But for my son, especially if it's his college life, I'm going to dress however he wants me to. Because when it's your own kids, I mean, you just can't help it.
Your son a Georgia fan?
Listen, my son's a huge sports fan. He has that way of sort of needling me about, I try to act like it doesn't bother me because I don't want to, get in his head. He's not as big a Georgia fan as I wish he was. I will say that.
Okay.
I will say that. I'll be very honest about that. All right, let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. A little more on the LSU spring game. Some uncertainty for LSU when it comes to the quarterback position, but maybe some growing certainty at other positions, including at running back, where we've heard a lot about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and it sounds like for the LSU spring game on Saturday, he did what he needed to do to take that next step towards being the real featured back for LSU this fall. Here's Orgeron on Edwards-Helaire.
I think Clyde shows that right now he's our most explosive back. Obviously, him and Nick are going to share first-team reps, but when Clyde's in there, we move the football, and he can make plays.
So the Nick, he references Nick Brissett there. But Edwards-Helaire is the guy that we have sort of thought of as the likely lead dog there for the LSU running back situation. Even if Trey Watson comes in the Cal transfer, Watson would only be the complimentary piece, I believe, of Edwards-Helaire. Any thoughts on kind of how he fits into this LSU running back rotation and really as a potential focal point for the offense coming off the spring?
Yeah, I thought he looked the part. I don't think that you're dealing with a Leonard Fournette, Darius Guy style of player. I don't. But I think that he looked the part of being the feature back. Now, you're going to have a lot of these other guys, and I think Proven's being a guy that you can probably lean on in order to kind of balance things out. But this is very clearly, in my eyes, an offense that is going to rely on the pass. And I think that that's not really a knock on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I thought he played really well Saturday, but when you watch the offense kind of work and you look at some of the misdirection that they had going on, you look at what they were really trying to do, Feature back at LSU in 2018 is not going to be feature back like it was in 2017, 2016, 2015. And I think that's a good thing for LSU fans. I don't think you mind that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire being the starting running back means you throw it around a little bit more. I think LSU fans are okay with that.
Yeah, Orgeron has said he wants to be 50-50 offensively. I think a lot of LSU fans feel that same way. I guess the other point I'd bring up quickly about LSU, too, here is you referenced this early in the show. It's, Clavon Chason and some of those pass rushes. It sounds like the LSU defensive front had a nice day.
Rashard Lawrence, Braden Fehoko, definitely Clavon Chason. I mean, this was an offensive line that's not close to being at full strength, not what LSU is typically. And both those starting tackles, what you think is going to be the starting tackles with Sadiq Charles and Austin DeCulis, I think is the favorite for the right tackle job. Neither one are in uniform, so that moves everybody else kind of up a step. The people that Clavon Chason was going up against, the tackles on that field on Saturday, not even in the same ballpark as what you want to be an SEC caliber guy.
Final point from Esteban Esteves, an LSU fan on YouTube, who says that Brissett's been the biggest disappointment so far. Yeah. I haven't been in Baton Rouge every day enough to sort of make that same point, but I certainly believe it to be true, given the fact they're even talking about Trey Watson from Cal right now.
Yeah, and listen, Leonard Fournette was shining. I'm with you though. Brissett to me didn't look to be that guy that you really, really want to rely on as a number 2 back in the fall. I thought that he kind of tiptoed a little bit. I don't know if he kind of lowered his shoulder at the end the way I expect LSU running backs to do. I'm not that low on him, but he didn't look the part for me Saturday.
All right, we close the show the same way each and every day. And for those of you who may have watched us for the first time today on Twitter, we hope you've enjoyed the show. We're always looking for our champions of life. And today it comes from, college kids, but not college football players. You may have seen Jeopardy had its college week not too long ago, and I guess in honor of March Madness or in honor of something, they tried to introduce the contestants in sort of a basketball-style way here, and the Jeopardy contestants were clearly told to emulate a basketball player and we call your name. These folks are obviously very smart, but also obviously maybe not spending a whole lot of time watching basketball. Let the awkwardness ensue.
Here are our 3 pints. A freshman at Brown University from Gainesville, Georgia, Drew Gar. A sophomore at the University of Central Florida from Sarasota, Florida, Hannah Sage. And a freshman at Tufts University from Los Altos, California, William Scott.
I have to admit, I think this is really funny.
I do too.
I love the girl in the middle. It's almost like she's holding a vase, trying to keep it from breaking. It's almost like she's at a baby shower, just sort of passing around the vase to make sure it doesn't break. Showing off the gift that's been given there.
The first guy there is from Gainesville, Georgia.
It's
man.
my hometown.
Your hometown? What's that guy doing?
I didn't think my hometown had ever produced a Brown graduate. I can promise you that. The people that I grew up with in Gainesville, Georgia, they're not in any Ivy League school right now.
I don't doubt it. That guy's not playing basketball
Is
anymore.
there a kudzu league somewhere? That's where my friends from high school probably ended up.
For sure.
All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks for being here with us today. Share the show with your friends on YouTube, Facebook, and I guess now on Twitter as well. Let them know we're talking about the SEC each and every day here. And if you want to check out the audio version of the show, we'll have the podcast up right when we're done to give you a chance to hear everything that you may have missed today. Or if you just prefer the audio, it'll be there for you as well. We'll see you again here tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for another episode of SEC Country Live.